Good morning, everybody. Welcome. We're delighted to have you here. My name is John Hamry, the president at CSIS. Before we do public events, we always have a little safety announcement. So I am your responsible safety officer today. So if anything happens, you're going to follow my instructions and we're all going to be safe. I would ask that if we do have to do something, our emergency exits are right here behind me. This is the door that's closest to the stairs that take us down to the street level, and if there's a problem out in front, we're going to go in the back. We'll meet over across at National Geographic. If the problem's in the back, we're going to go in the front. We'll go over to St. Matthew's. We have arrangements that we've worked out with them. So just please follow our instructions if we have to do anything, but we're not going to have any problems. So I'm very, very pleased to have all of you with us today. And glad to see so many of you could come. It's cold out there. Gosh, I grew up in South Dakota and moved away to get away from all that stuff, and here it followed me. So it won't be long, and then we'll have a great snow, and we'll get you out of here before that starts. We're sharing with you today the unclassified version of a report that we were asked to do by the Defense Department. It was mandated by the Congress in the National Defense Authorization Act of 2015, I think it was. We were asked to look at the implementation, as it were, of this so-called pivot to Asia. The administration doesn't use that term, because it was for different reasons. But when the so-called pivot to Asia was announced in January of 2012, it signified a remarkably important transition in American history. Not many people have paused to think about it, but for 350 years, this country always said its primary focus was Europe. That was always our first priority. And for the first time in 350 years, we said our first priority is Asia. That's a remarkable development, and it's not been really adequately understood or appreciated. It is a big shift, and because of that, it's going to take a fair amount of details and implementation. And what I think you'll see from this report is a review of what it's going to take to start making this rebalance more effective. And we're going to go through that, and I think John and Zach, you're going to give us a presentation of the results of this report. It has been delivered. Everything that you will see here today, and I hope you have the report, is consistent with the classified report we submitted. Obviously, there's more detail that is not presented here, but it's fully consistent, and I think does represent a very strong consensus that's emerging between the Department of Defense and the Congress. So I think it's an important contribution, and we're very glad to have all of you here for this presentation. Ambassador Chuiza, let me just say thank you for coming. You have been a great champion and friend for CSIS, and I'm very, very honored that you would be here today. I know you don't live that far away, so it's pretty easy to get here, but I'm very glad that you could join us. We'll also have, the former CNO, previous CNO, John Greenert will be here with kind of our group discussion. That'll take place at 9:30. But now we will turn to a little bit of a video, I think, that's going to introduce the topic and then a briefing. Thank you all for coming, and we look forward to having you participate with us during the day. Thank you.
The center of gravity in global affairs is shifting towards Asia. In late 2011, President Obama announced a rebalance to the Asia-Pacific to reflect this new reality. A new CSIS study confirms the need for such a rebalance and recognizes the progress made over the last 4 years. But regional challenges have outpaced expectations, as have competing military requirements. Budget limits further complicate a successful rebalance to the Asia-Pacific. The U.S. government will have to intensify its efforts in 4 key areas over the next decade if the rebalance is to succeed. First, U.S. leaders need to speak with a single voice about America's goals in Asia, both at home and with regional allies and partners. American national security leaders often list conflicting priorities, causing uncertainty in Asia about U.S. objectives and commitment. The U.S. must be clear and consistent in its intentions and public pronouncements. Second, U.S. leaders should strengthen ally and partner capability, capacity, and interoperability. The United States should work with allies and partners to develop a web of federated capabilities in the region that advance common interests. This includes jointly developing and fielding new systems and coordinating efforts with major allies to develop the capacities of less capable countries. Third, the United States should intensify ongoing efforts to ensure a geographically distributed, operationally resilient, and politically sustainable forward military presence in Asia. This means moving ahead with consolidation on Okinawa, construction on Guam, and deployments to Australia. In addition, the United States should examine increasing U.S. capabilities in the Western Pacific, submarines, amphibious lift, and perhaps an additional carrier because there is no substitute for being there. The United States will also need to make adjustments to better operate in the sophisticated threat environment it faces in the Asia-Pacific. The United States should also develop new command relationships better suited to the challenges of the emerging threat environment. Fourth, in order to meet the generational challenge posed by Chinese military advances, the United States should accelerate development of innovative military capabilities and concepts. It must experiment, it must upgrade, and it must invent. Ultimately, the success of the rebalance will depend on U.S. trade, diplomacy, and productive relationships across the entire region, as well as defense capabilities. These efforts can maintain a peaceful and open international system, uphold U.S. interests, and strengthen regional security. For the full CSIS report, visit asiarebalance.csis.org.
Good morning. I'm Zach Cooper. I'm a fellow here with the Asia program. And along with my colleague John Schaus, we will be presenting to you some of the findings of our study. Before you, you have a blue pamphlet, which is about a tenth of this larger study. The larger study is about 300 pages, as Dr. Hamre mentioned. You can find it online. We have chosen not to print it out for you today so that you can all walk home without too much paper in your book bags. But if you're looking for something to read on a snowy weekend today, over the weekend, please go ahead. And it's at asiarebalance.csis.org. So I'm just going to walk through for about 10 minutes some of the key findings and recommendations of our study. And this is the report overview. What you have in front of you is the abridged version of our longer report. That includes the introduction, part 1, and the recommendations, part 7, of our longer report. The full report also includes substantial sections on U.S. interests and risks in Asia, on U.S. force posture in Asia, the role of allies and partners, as well as the role of regional organizations, U.S. capabilities in the region, and finally, the Arctic, which is an increasingly important area of study. With that, let me move into our central findings. And I want to be very clear here. The entire study team is very supportive of the U.S. rebalance to Asia. When it was announced in 2011, I think everyone would agree that it was an incredibly important statement, as Dr. Hamre said, of the shifting focus of the United States. But we also find that the United States must do more to rebalance to the Asia-Pacific region. And what we'll talk about here today is focused on the defense component of the rebalance. Certainly there are other parts. The economic component, embodied most often by TPP, is an incredibly important aspect, but we were asked by Congress to focus on the defense component of the rebalance. So that's what we'll focus on here today. We have 4 main findings in our report. The first 2 are focused on the United States, and the second 2 are focused on the region. Our first finding is that the administration has not articulated a clear, coherent, or consistent Asia strategy. This is not to say that there are not large numbers of speeches where senior administration officials have explained aspects of the strategy. However, CSIS has done a separate study looking at the statements that administration officials have made about the rebalance, and they vary. There are different priorities given, there are different numbers of priorities, and different listings and orders. So one of our key findings is that the United States needs a more clear, coherent, and consistent strategy. A second finding, which Mark Hansen will talk about in greater detail, is that the defense budget cuts have limited DoD's ability to implement the rebalance to Asia. A third finding, focusing on Chinese capabilities, is that China's anti-access and area denial capabilities threaten to undermine U.S., ally, and partner security interests. And these capabilities have been growing rapidly. Recently, we've even seen somewhat of a shift towards power projection on the part of China's military. And fourth, Chinese intentions. In recent years, China has exceeded the risk tolerance that most experts expected them to have. We've seen this at CSIS with our Asia Maritime Transparency Initiative, which has been tracking Chinese activity in the South China Sea. This is a picture of one of the Spratly Islands where an airfield that's been newly constructed is becoming operational. So based on those four findings, CSIS came up with 4 buckets of recommendations. I will walk through the first 2 of these buckets and then hand off to my colleague, John Schaus, to walk you through the last 2. The 4 findings are that the United States needs to align Asia strategy within the U.S. government and with allies and partners. It needs to strengthen ally and partner capability, capacity, resilience, and interoperability. It needs to sustain and expand U.S. military presence. And finally, it must accelerate development of innovative capabilities and concepts. So the first bucket of recommendations, we'll have 5 separate recommendations. You can find them on page 7 in the abridged report in somewhat greater detail. And on the 300-page report online, we also get into these recommendations in even greater detail. So the first recommendation is, as I said, to align Asia strategy within the U.S. government and with allies and partners. Our first recommendation is to prepare an Asia-Pacific strategic report. This is reminiscent of the reports on Asia strategy in the 1990s, including the East Asia Strategic Report. And this is not to say that the administration has not written important documents about Asia strategy. One of them on screen is the Asia-Pacific Maritime Security Strategy. The challenge is that that document, for example, is a defense-only document, and it only covers part of the regional functional challenge. So we need a whole-of-government strategy. And that's probably something that will need to be left to the next administration to produce. Our second recommendation is to increase administration outreach to Congress. Where there has been cooperation between the administration and Congress, we've seen very important work that's been done. One area is the Maritime Security Initiative, which Secretary Carter announced at Shangri-La last year, which was a joint effort between the Armed Services Committees and the Department of Defense. We suggest that to increase that type of cooperation, that the Congress should establish an Asia-Pacific Observers Group, similar in many ways to the Arms Control Observers Group that existed during the Cold War. Third, we need to ensure alignment between strategy and resources. In the past QDR processes, this has been a big focus, and we know in the upcoming Defense Strategy Review, the new name for the QDR, this will be also a real area of focus, but it's very difficult for defense leaders to match their decreasing resources with increasing roles and responsibilities, not just in Asia, but in Europe, the Middle East, and elsewhere. And so we must bring those into alignment. Fourth, the United States must better coordinate its strategy with allies and partners. When CSIS experts traveled through the region, and we did a great deal of that in conducting this study, we found confusion in the region about U.S. strategy, especially as regards China. And in some countries, there are differences of opinion with the United States about China policy. So we need to better align those strategies with our allies and partners. And last in this bucket, we must expand confidence building and crisis management with China. The U.S.-China relationship is incredibly important to the region. There's been important progress made recently. For example, the QES agreement, the Code for Unplanned Encounters at Sea, makes crises less likely and helps avoid them becoming conflicts. And these types of efforts are important. So U.S. outreach to China must continue, and it must be strengthened. Now, our second bucket of recommendations: strengthen ally and partner capability, capacity, resilience, and interoperability. Here, too, we have 5 recommendations. The first is to pursue federated approaches with highly capable regional allies. Some of these kinds of capabilities might include regional missile defenses, undersea warfare capabilities, but what's really important here is that as the region is facing decreasing resources in some cases and increasing challenges, we all must work more closely together to address those challenges. Second, we must build maritime security capacity in Southeast Asia. There are a number of efforts ongoing to do so. The Department of Defense, the Senate Armed Services Committee have both announced big efforts in this regard. The Maritime Security Initiative, as we already noted, is important, but the United States will have to work with allies and partners to jointly build maritime security capacity throughout the region. Third, the United States should form a standing U.S. Joint Task Force for the Western Pacific. This is a mission that for a long time was managed by Joint Task Force 519, the logo of which is shown in the image up there. One of our main findings is that unity of effort is incredibly important, and that standing command relationships in a crisis are vital. And therefore, having a standing joint task force that can be trained and exercised regularly is incredibly important in the region. And right now, this mission is conducted by PACOM, which is very capable, but has a large number of responsibilities, both political, dealing with Washington, dealing with other allies and partners. So really having a group that can focus on the war fight, if there is one, is absolutely critical. The fourth recommendation in this area is to encourage Japan to establish a joint operations command. This is similar in many ways in our minds to the Australian Joint Operations Command. Right now, Japan has a growing gray zone challenge, and this is something that the United States has to work with them on to address. And one of the challenges is a disconnect potentially between elements of the Japanese self-defense forces and that of the U.S. military. So that is, our recommendation is to establish a joint operations command to help address that challenge. And the last recommendation in this area is to deepen whole-of-government humanitarian assistance and disaster relief expertise. There have been a huge number of training and exercise opportunities for forces throughout the region on humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, but too many of them have been focused on the military. We need to bring in the other elements of the government across countries to help expand our ability to rapidly respond to crises. And this is incredibly important in Asia, in part because Asia is quite vulnerable to growing climate change challenges. It's historically, not only does it have a large population, but much of the population is close to the sea. And so increasing humanitarian assistance and disaster relief capability is absolutely critical as we move forward. And with that, I will hand off to my colleague, John Schaus.
Thank you, Zach. And thank you. I'm John Schaus. I'm a fellow in the International Security Program at CSIS, and I will walk through the third and fourth basket of recommendations, third being sustain and expand U.S. military presence, and the fourth being accelerate development of innovative capabilities and concepts. So the third basket, sustain and expand military presence. Throughout our study, both within conversations at the Pentagon, at PACOM, and with U.S. allies and partners, we found a consistent message that there is no substitute for being there. And that means having forward stationed, forward operating forces from the United States working daily with allies and partners. It contributes to deterrence, to reassurance, and overall achievement of U.S. objectives. So we found 10 issues in this basket that I will walk you through quickly. First, continue implementing and resourcing key posture initiatives. Particularly of note here are efforts within Japan, Korea, Australia, Guam, and Hawaii to realign and adjust U.S. force posture to ensure that it is more sustainable from a political basis, more reliable from a military perspective. And this will require close collaboration with our allies, as well as continued support from both the Congress and the Defense Department. Second, increase surface fleet presence. The U.S. Navy is out and about every day in the Pacific, Eastern, Western, in the Indian Ocean region. This presence is enormously important, provides eyes forward, provides a rapid response force, but demands are high. Continued U.S. operations in the Middle East, demands in Europe, as well as demands for regular operations in the Pacific are taxing the fleet. So to increase forward surface presence, we recommend moving additional ships to the Western Pacific, likely Japan, as well as considering moving an aircraft carrier to Japan to enhance the time on station. Third, we recommend improving undersea capacity. The undersea capability is one of the U.S. great advantages, as was mentioned a few moments ago by Zach. Ensuring that we have enough submarines and they're forward stationed and they're operating on a consistent basis, particularly with allies and capable partners, is important. We recommend home porting an additional 2 Los Angeles-class submarines in Guam and exploring options for home porting of submarines in the Indian Ocean region. Fourth, we recommend deploying additional amphibious and other lift to the Asia-Pacific. Amphibious lift is the transportation service for our Marine Corps. It provides a flexible, multi-mission, very capable force, and it allows our Marine Corps to be extremely functional in a wide range of places. However, increasing U.S. Marine Corps rotations is taxing existing amphibious fleet capacity, and we recommend stationing an additional amphibious ship in Guam, as well as over time considering moving the 10th ARG from the West Coast, the amphibious ready group, from the West Coast to the Western Pacific, possibly Japan, and standing up an 11th amphibious ready group. Fifth, continue diversifying air operating locations. Currently, the U.S. Air Force is based out of a small number of very large air operating bases in the Pacific. As the anti-access area denial challenge grows and missile ranges increase, these facilities become increasingly vulnerable and increasingly could increasingly be seen as valuable targets. To reduce the risk from a small number of bases, we recommend operating more regularly from a dispersed set of airfields that we identify and develop with allies and partners in coordination. Sixth, we recommend bolstering regional missile defenses. Again, the growing missile challenge from anti-access area denial capabilities creates a situation where the United States, as well as our allies and partners, need to have a more capable, more affordable missile defense option. In the near term, what we see as requirement is first, purchasing more missiles and stockpiling them and more launchers so that they're available in the Pacific should they be needed. And second, to increase ongoing efforts to better link together allies and partners in missile defense, such as what the Defense Department is doing with Japan and Korea currently. Seventh, we recommend that the Army advance and adapt the regionally aligned forces concept. The regionally aligned forces concept is the Army's way of identifying that having deep expertise in a region, in languages, and in culture is important. This is a global concept for the Army. So they are trying to create focused units for Asia, Africa, Europe, the Middle East, and other places. In the Pacific, the U.S. Army Pacific has developed an initiative called Pacific Pathways, where it takes a single unit and it deploys that one unit to a number of exercises in sequence so that the unit exercising with allies and partners is the most capable, is the most ready, and is developing deep expertise. While this is a good concept, force demands on the Army will make this a hard-to-sustain initiative in the future. Therefore, we recommend continuing it at a smaller level of deployment, possibly a company, battalion, or brigade headquarters size, rather than a full brigade being deployed. Eighth, logistical challenges, and we recommend addressing these. So I'm a Vikings fan, and I think of logistics sort of like the holder in a field goal situation, right? You don't want to think about them, and if you do, it's usually bad news. So that is the issue with logistics. It is not a marquee item. It's not something that gets headlines, but it's a key enabler and one of the reasons that the United States Armed Forces are so effective around the world, because we have phenomenal logistics. We recommend 4 areas that need additional focus or resources to sustain this advantage for the United States. The first is maintaining the presence of a TAOE supply ship in the Pacific that resourcing may require to be pulled out of service in the next couple of years. Second, developing now mechanisms that allow contractors to be rapidly fielded should they be needed. 15 years of combat experience in Afghanistan and Iraq have demonstrated the degree to which the U.S. Armed Forces depend on contractor support for maintenance, for logistics, and other things. Conversations with Defense Department officials and military officers suggest these contracts can take a long time to go from concept to implementation, and we need to accelerate that. And third, we identified the need to ensure that the logistics communication networks, and particularly communication networks, are secured and are reliable so that if they are needed in a contingency, that they are available and not compromised. Ninth, stockpiling critical precision munitions. Like logistics, precision munitions are a significant amplifier of U.S. military capabilities. They allow us to be more effective in a shorter period of time. But building these munitions, developing them, and fielding them takes a fairly long period of time. So we support the sustainment of the recent increase in purchases of precision-guided munitions, which was in the last appropriations bill, and we recommend forward stationing as many as feasible, either on land or at sea in the Pacific. 10th, the last item in this basket is to enhance ISR coverage and PACOM through partnership with allies. What this means is twofold. First, that the United States should develop with capable allies platforms and software to better do analysis and collection of imagery in important areas. And second, that the United States should work more closely with allies to coordinate deployment schedules and issues of interest so that we maximize the capability we have without duplication. Moving to recommendation 4, the fourth basket. We recommend accelerating development of innovative capabilities and concepts. This sounds a little bit amorphous, but what this really means is that the environment that the United States faces is evolving very quickly. And so operating at a steady, methodical pace may not be sufficient in the future. So the United States, and in particular the Defense Department, must embrace new ways of experimenting, of modernizing, and of innovating that may be uncomfortable in the current structure of the department. We have several recommendations in this area. First, institutionalize a culture of experimentation. The image there is a memo that the Deputy Secretary and the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs issued describing the need to enhance wargaming in the department. We think this is a good first step, but we should go further. Not only should we enhance wargaming, we recommend creating an annual series of exercises, war games, and simulations to test the most challenging problems that the department faces. These should be fielded from a large number of students in professional military education institutions, and they should play against the best analysts from the intelligence community and academia to really test and experiment. Second, to encourage rapid platform evolution. Excuse me. In an era where the iPhone is obsolete after 4 to 6 years, we develop military hardware to last 40 to 50 years. And the comparison isn't entirely fair, but the pace of technological change is clear. So ensuring that the United States develops technologically capable platforms and systems that can adjust and evolve with time are very important. Thank you. Third, we recommend developing advanced long-range missiles. As mentioned, the anti-access area denial threat is growing, and the United States has invested large sums of resources and time to develop highly capable platforms, and the United States operates the best platforms in the world. The payloads these platforms carry often have shorter ranges or are not designed to deal with the kind of highly congested electromagnetic or missile defense space that they would have to penetrate. And so ensuring that long-range missiles receive sufficient funding is important. Fourth, the flip side of long-range missiles is ensuring we have good missile defenses. Over the medium to long term, the United States probably can't continue to afford to operate extremely expensive, though highly capable missiles to shoot other, probably not very expensive missiles. So we recommend developing continuing to resource and invest in emerging capabilities such as directed energy, lasers, electromagnetic railguns, and even advanced technologies through legacy systems like artillery and ship cannons that will enable more effective and more affordable missile defense capabilities. Fifth, we recommend fielding additional air combat systems. As I mentioned, U.S. platforms are second to none in the world. We have the B-2, the F-22, the F-35 is coming online. These are phenomenal platforms. However, they are not designed to operate in the environments that we're seeing in the future, or at least not enough of them are. And so we recommend continuing investment in platforms like the Long-Range Strike Bomber, but moving beyond that to include additional technologies for penetrating ISR, for manned and unmanned teaming, to fully leverage the emerging capabilities to maximize the opportunities for commanders and political leaders. Sixth, we recommend that the U.S. continue to invest and exploit the undersea advantage. In particular, in addition to the posture changes we recommend focusing on capabilities such as the Virginia payload module. The Virginia is the next class of, and the current class of U.S. attack submarines. And every other submarine produced over the next 15 years or so will have what is called the Virginia payload module, which will make it a more capable and strike platform to support land, sea, and air operations with cruise missiles and other types of payloads. We think that is essential. Last in this section, we recommend augmenting space, cyber, and electromagnetic warfare capabilities. These are all areas where the United States has, for decades, had an advantage over potential adversaries and where we work some with allies and partners. However, the democratization of technology, as it were, is making investments in this area more affordable and more achievable by a wide range of actors. So to ensure continued U.S. Capability in this area and that the capability is better than all, we recommend investing in cyber mission teams for both offense and defense so that we have the personnel who are capable of exploiting and operating in the cyber domain. Second, that space assets on which we depend for communications and a wide range of other vital activities are hardened against potential electromagnetic attacks, but also that we develop redundant systems that may operate either in or out of space to provide the same capability. And lastly, electromagnetic warfare is an area where the U.S. could increasingly become vulnerable, and we recommend that future platforms and exercises both are designed to operate in denied environments where communication is jammed or denied, as well as that we train to operate in those environments so that we are not purely dependent on that technology. So our conclusions. First, the rebalance should be a cornerstone of the next administration's foreign policy. We believe that it will be, regardless of the party, and we fully support that. Second, that these recommendations can strengthen the rebalance and ensure its longevity. Third, these initiatives require additional resources, but that those resources are not beyond our reach. And lastly, the potential risks to U.S. interests require a sense of urgency. We must recognize that change happens slowly if left to its own devices, and we must focus on the challenges and focus our energies to meet those challenges. So that concludes this briefing. We'll take a short 10-minute coffee break so that we can get our panelists prepared, and then we'll plan to convene back here at approximately 9:50. Thank you.